Okay, we've got Train Grows, Mighty 390. Pretty happy with the saw train, I really am. Something interesting about that, um, OEM cylinder, a lot of the later, like replacement OEM cylinders, or like the 372 or 390, back 10 years ago, even some of them. The 372s I noticed, and then when they cut that squish band, I think their tooling was wiped or something. It's quite irregular. When you see that, it really bears a lot of watching. You check your squish anyway, you just do. I did not have enough squish to do base gasket delete, but I'll tell you what I did do. I put a 14 thousandths base gasket in there. And so that gives us right there 26, 27, right where I want to be. Uh, that's beautiful. The bigger the saw, the more I leave. I'd like to see, rather. If there's a doubt of going not enough or too much, I'd really go too much. It doesn't affect the operation of the saw until you get up there about 40 thousandths or better. That's my experience. But they were tearing down an old barn. Guess what I just happened to stumble across? Yeah, that was an odd one, wasn't it? That was sitting somewhere for a long time. Yeah, double bearded. It's Kelly Works. True Temper, Kelly Works. There's more writing on it. Handmade Kelly Works is what it said. Well, that's kind of interesting. The only thing about this particular one is on this side right here, somebody beat that eye up pretty good. See that? Instead of rehanging the handle or doing something about it, putting more wedges in. This isn't the only one I ever seen around this area. You just must have laid it on something and beat the crap out of it with a maul. But what I'll do is I'll actually heat this. I know a lot of you guys don't want to do things like that because you're afraid of the temper. I'm not afraid of it. I'm going to heat that and run a drift down through it and get that eye back to where it belongs, and then I'll retemper this. It's not a big deal. You don't want it too soft. You don't want it too hard. Yeah, I can do that without hurting the sacks any. And besides the fact, it's for me. But that's kind of a neat old axe. I was kind of happy. I'm gonna keep an eye on that site. You never know what you might find. I found a whole bunch of hardware and stuff that was some horse harness. Just the rings and buckles and things like that. I didn't find, but that right there was kind of cool. I says, yeah, I want that. She said, I don't care. Just throw it away. You get buried. So I'm gonna look for more accents. Okay, train. I got one heat cycle on this. I got a few more to go. And this one's got a really good oiler. Which, that, I like seeing that. Oh, bumped the camera. But now it's time to put the top cover on and the air cleaner and get this buttoned up. Now we got one more to run. I gotta run Sunday. I might have to pick and choose because now we got a mess of them to run. We might even get to run old junkyard dog, maybe. Want to run it on gas. Get the feel for the saw. Run it without that banana pipe, with the banana pipe. Get the feel for that. I want to see if that makes a difference. I'll share that with you. Because they're pretty cheap. $25 and you get a head. I don't expect it'll have resonance like you'd want. But with what we're doing for chainsaws, I think it makes a difference. I'm going to tell you something right now. When that change alone, putting that banana pipe on that, what I showed you, I had to readjust that saw considerable. Richer, not leaner. richer. It wanted more fuel. It's already wanting a lot of fuel. So I think what I'm going to do is we're going to go ahead and put the alcohol carb on it at some point, and we're going to run it on nitro. We're going to give it a shot, see what it does. I'll tell you, from my experience with nitro in the past, yeah, it's kind of fun. It really honestly is. But you got to dump your fuel when you get done running, and then you got to get some gas, put a little gas in it, and start it up. Get that gas out of that carburetor. Because I'm going to warn you, that nitromethane is highly corrosive. That'll eat that aluminum. If you leave it a day or something, or two, it's not going to bother at that point. But if you leave that for weeks, when you'll pull your carburetor apart and you'll find all this looks like gray liquid in there. That's from eating that carb out. They'll only eat so much, I know, but it's a good thing. I mean, it's a good thing. I'm doing it just to see if we can do it on a saw. I've never done it on a saw. I've done it on bikes. Works on bikes. Same sets of problems. You end up changing your fuel line and one thing and another. It's not a big deal. Get this old girl cleaned up a little bit. Dawn dish liquid and water. Let that just soak a minute. We've been popping out quite a few saws, honestly. The one I'm kind of excited about is our G660. That's the one I'm really excited about. Well, I'm excited about all of them, but that one's been a thorn in my butt. I can't say never, but generally I don't have trouble with these saws. If you do, you just, whatever crops up, you just fix it. It's no big deal. So when we do that, they generally work out pretty good. But that one, it's like it thinks it's got a permanent home on a warm shelf. Well, I'm sorry, but it don't. And yeah, I've never experienced such a myriad of problems with one particular saw. Now, what's funny is I've done, I think, 2 of them, the orange and white Chinese saws, putting different crank into them. One I used New West product crank, and one I used an OEM crank that was used, that was very nice, that Skidder ran over years ago, and I thought, well, I'll just take that crank cylinder stuff, which I did, and I didn't have any trouble with them. This one threw me just sideways. It just threw me sideways. But so far looks good. It looks good. And you know what's funny? That's a beautiful saw. I mean, that's pretty. That's a really pretty saw. I kind of like that blue. I really do. It's a little different, you know. Now, the one thing I really need to do, and I think I put it, where did I put that? I have another handle. And let's start this up. Let's just see. It's cool enough. Get my towels all the way. Yeah, that's a good one. Them 390s will jump around a little more than them 372s do. That port work on that one is really designed for guys going to put a bar on a saw and really cut into a tree. Um, that 390s have a whole monster torque curve. They're serious, and I like to enhance the good points of the saws when I build them, and you learn, and I like to try to get rid of the negatives. Like the 372s with that long stroke, they generally didn't like to follow through, and they'd idle erratic and they'd quit until they got nice and hot. And then they'd want to race a little bit, at least in this region. I don't know about. Now, they might run different in California. Yeah, out in California, it could be hot right now. And boy, the poor guys out there with them fires, that's really destroys me. That's a shame. It really is. I see, and I'm getting off topic, but I'm going to tell you something. In Oregon, there's a small town. I don't remember the name of it. I watched it this morning on YouTube, little couple 3-minute video. There's been entire towns burning. Well, these people got together and they got their heavy equipment and their shovels and their axes and their chainsaws out. And they cut fire breaks. They put little fires out. All the snags that are leaning, we call them leaners on the West Coast, but we call them snags too. They're dry, so the fire goes right up them, and it gets into the canopy, and if you get enough of it going, it'll go ahead and burn. These people worked their butts off, and they saved their little town. They didn't depend on somebody else. They didn't. You know, the government-funded firefighters in the state of Oregon firefighters had way bigger problems. Don't wait for somebody. Take care of business yourself. That's what communities like that do. I'm so happy to see that, especially in today's world, because I'll guarantee you that you had both political parties involved working side by side just like it was intended. And that's that. And I'm sorry, but I'm proud of them people. I'm damn proud. That's the way it is around here when there's something going on. We get a flood or we get a fire. Fires here are horrendous. The forest fires are. They don't never hurt the trees a lot. Well, they do on the south-facing hills. But the fires roar up these frickin' cliffs and rock cuts and up these ravines like it's a chimney. You can hear it. I mean, it's scary. It really is. Let me tell you something that was funny. I went, way before I went in the military, I went down and drove track trailer down in Florida. Hauling oranges one winter. And that was an experience all itself, I'll tell you that. I learned a lot. You know, we're sheltered here. We don't know what people's really like. I learned a lot about people then. But when I was down there was this fella that had a Dodge Demon. And it skipped like a son of a gun, and I knew it. And, boy, I wanted that. I wanted that Dodge Demon. He had N50-15s. It was that lemon twist yellow with the black stripes. And he had 50s on the rear and little skitties up front. And I wanted that in the worst way. Well, he had it for sale one day, and I said, what do you want for it? And he told me, and being young, I went ahead and gave him the money he asked for, and I bought that car. He told me he's down on one cylinder, so that's all right. He says, got 456 gears with a spool in it rear end. I said, what's a spool? I didn't even know. That makes that live positive traction all the time. He says, you got to watch that on wet roads. Boy, he wasn't kidding. You goose that thing, that can come right around on you like right now. Well, to make a long story short, that was, just about a month before I decided to come back home, come up here, and go back to work. And it was interesting. So I drove that Dodge Demon up I 95, 50 mile an hour on 7 cylinders. And it took, for every tank of gas, I had to put 2 quarts of oil in it from that one cylinder being messed up. And it was getting a little worse. It really was by the time I got home. Well, I drove straight through. It takes a long. Boy, I'll tell you what, even back then, people were crazy on I 95. Boom, 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 boom. I just like, oh my God, just leave me alone. When 456 gears, I was whining so tight. I was wanting to make that motor last till I got home. And it did. It made it. It did. I had tough old Dodge, I got to admit that. That was actually my first car, was that Dodge Demon. Yeah, it 346 pack, 4-speed. And so I'm pulling in our little hamlet here where I live, just a country. It's not a town. It's just a bunch of houses kind of spread out through the valley floor. And I'm looking, and I said, "Oh my God, this whole town has changed so much." I couldn't believe what I see. Of course, I was tired. About 3 o'clock in the morning, I come rolling in, and after fighting that old car for a long ways, and there were street lights up on the hills. Street lights, I swear to God. Your mind will make up for what it doesn't understand, and it does. I swore there was none but just the big long street lights. You know what it was? They'd had a 3-day fire, and it was out, but there were stumps glowing here and there, and a piece of deadfall glowing all over on that right hill. And I swear, they were lined right up, looked like rows of streets, and up the valley. There's a T in the valley, and but I just pulled right up. We crossed the bridge, and I just stopped right in the middle of the road. And I said, what the heck happened here? It's like, you got to be kidding me. I was only gone for like 6, 7 months. There's nothing how can you I was like, wow, you want to talk about progress? My dad told me that sooner or later, these areas like this will be nothing but city streets. And he had me convinced right that second, My dad, he was a wonderful man. You'd all liked him. I'm a junior. I'm Harvey Jr., by the way. Dad was a farm boy. Grew up milking cows. He knew what work was, and he'd spent some time in the Air Force during the Korean War, stationed in Japan. Well, he learned to fly when he was in the Air Force. As a civilian, he was a aircraft mechanic, and he serviced aircraft. And he learned to fly. Well, when he got home, he decided to get his pilot's license, which he did. And he ended up buying different airplanes. But one in particular that was real intriguing, and if you look this up, at the time they said 1 out of 1,000 pilots are capable of flying this aircraft. It was a Cessna 195. And they have a radial engine on them. They used them his was a military plane, but his was an executive model. It was a general's plane. But they also used that. These were before helicopters, really. This plane was designed. And they did use it for medevac because they could take off and land a short distance. Well, I'll tell you what, when that big old radial engine started, and I was just a little snapper, it scared me. Oh, that thing would scare me. If I was in the plane, it didn't bother me a bit. Oh, I thought that was great. I'll never forget them old warplanes of his. I'll never forget the smell of them. They all smelled the same. And you know what was funny? When I went in the military and started flying in them 130s and 141s and flying medevac and helicopters, them aircraft smelled just like that. That's what it reminded me of. And it was kind of neat to have a blast from the past, kind of like that. So that was quite interesting for me. Well, Dad flew this 195 in, and I'll never forget the field across the way from us is not a long field at all. It really isn't. And there's trees at both ends. Well, he brought that plane in. I swear that plane went like this, just kind of stopped and dropped. I swear it did. Well, him and a neighbor, friend of Dad's, he painted cars for a living out of his own shop. And Dad brought the plane home because he wanted to paint it. And he did. He painted it. And him and his friend Lyle. And oh my goodness sakes. That plane turned out just gorgeous. Just gorgeous when he got done. Because it was white with a green and black. Now, on that plane, he wanted a black belly because the engine oil would make streaks on them. On that, whatever engine it was one of them was notorious for pumping oil, leaking oil a little bit. And I don't even remember what, I think it was a Continental, but I can't tell you which one it was, which I really don't know. So he took that plane off. He backed that right into the hedgerow and he went full throttle. Held his brakes and he had wheel chocks. And that tail stood right up in that tree line and he jumped the chocks and down through he went and there's like a little like that and he comes up the other side. There's a plane of commitment with flying that if you haven't taken off by a certain distance, you ain't going to stop either. Well, he'd already passed that when he said he got to that ridge. It's just a little high spot in the field. He said, if I don't take off right there, he said, I'll never make it. And he took off, and that plane just slowly coming up like this. And he was full throttle, and it was working. And as he went over the trees on the other end, I'll never forget this, I seen leaves go like that. The wheels were in the tops of the trees, and the prop was cutting brush. But he made it, and he flew in to Hornell, New York with the airplane. That's where he was keeping it. No, he was not. It was down in Gangs Mill next to Corning. That's where he was. Real interesting old aircraft. It really was. And they'd land in a tight spot. They really would. And his old friend of his, older guy, Vic Howland, had a Piper J2, a Cub, but he had I think the first one ever built. I remember when he refabricated it, he put they were wood with fabric. Right in his driveway of his house, he put new fabric on and slacked it. Old Vic, that plane wouldn't fly only about 45 mile an hour, something like that. It wasn't fast. I remember one day in this little valley, Dad just going wow up through with one of his airplanes, and there was a headwind. Old Vic Howland, he goes up through the valley, and he turns right around and went up over the hill. I seen him struggling. He comes back, and he's trying to land. That's what he's trying to do. Well, when you got a 60 mile an hour headwind and you're going 45 miles an hour, that means you're backing up 15 mile an hour. And that's exactly what he did. He was backing up. Well, there he is, going backwards through there. And I'll be damned. All of a sudden, he got down on near the river flats because he'd been trying to land. He couldn't land, and he was low on fuel, and he knew it. And I'll be dang if he didn't land that airplane and about 6 foot going backwards. He did. Now, my father had that on 8mm because he landed first. And I don't know whatever became all that 8mm stuff from back then, but I tell you what, if we ever find it, it sure would be some really fun stuff on there for you guys to see. It would. But can you imagine that old cotcher doing that? I'll tell you where Vic's airplane is. It's in the Smithsonian Institution. Yep, it's hanging from the ceiling. So you go in there and see a J2 Piper. That was his airplane. In fact, I'm not positive of this, but I think his name's on that. Quite possibly. I knew it used to be years ago. And but ain't that the darndest old thing you ever seen? People, I love you. Train, I like your saw. We're gonna run that post haste. I'm getting the bug. I've been sitting on this stool too long. It's time to run some saws. Take care, people. Goodbye.